I now invite David McCullough to come forward to light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words: open our eyes to see what is beautiful, open our minds to learn what is true, open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant, which you find printed in your order of service, saying, love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
Early in my ministry career, I set myself to solve a problem I had leading worship. It had to do with the silent meditation time. I think that silence is important. Even if it's just for a minute or so, that practice of sitting still together in silence is a healthy contrast to what many of our lives are mostly like. If nothing else, it's a reminder of how good it feels and how much we need a little silence, a little stillness in our busy lives. Gathered here and uniting in silence, we can each turn that time to our own purpose and need, staying connected to one another by the act of holding that space of stillness for each other. Some may simply listen to this silence. Some may enter a meditative state. Some may pray. All of these uses of the silence are grounding and centering, and that's the gift we give each other in this practice. Silence as a space to hold and support our diverse spiritual paths. So here's what my problem was. I had to manage the time. How was I to do that? If I myself entered a meditative state, got absorbed in prayer, I'd likely lose track of time and spoil the experience for the rest of you by making the time too short or too long or just unpredictable from week to week. I needed a way to time the silence without watching the clock, because not everybody closes their eyes during the silence. And nobody likes to see somebody in charge watching the clock. Ideally, I needed a way to time the silence so that also helped me to be centered, allowed me to enter the silence with you in the same spirit. My solution was to sing a hymn to myself silently in my mind as a kind of prayer for myself as a worship leader. The one I settled on, which I sing to myself this way every time I lead worship, was the hymn that we sang as our opening hymn, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. It's a hymn that puts preaching and service in perspective and invites the spirit of mutual love to move and work among us. It's a meditation that keeps me grounded vocationally, a fine thing to have memorized all these years. And when I sing it to myself in my mind, we are guaranteed a silence of about 1.5 minutes each time. Problem solved. And my solution held an unsought grace for me. As it turns out, I needed that hymn as a regular spiritual practice. It helped ground me, not just during a silent time in worship, but in challenging times, far from worship. That's how the best practices work, spiritual and otherwise, by reminding ourselves regularly of the values by which we strive to live. By focusing our attention on them with a deliberate practice, we form the habit of thinking of them, and they spring to mind more readily and often, as if by themselves, in our daily living. That's the real power of prayer. That's the value of ritual and of private spiritual practice. It's the power of any discipline that helps us to realize our full abilities to live our values and become more whole and wholesome people as individuals and as a religious community. Such disciplines help us achieve our best goals in life, keep our noblest vision before our eyes, and alive in our hearts. They help us cultivate our strengths and compensate for or diminish our weaknesses. They help us to appreciate and help one another and to help our neighbors in the larger community. They help us do all of this by calling our attention to our values and by cultivating and strengthening our powers and habits of attention. Good powers and habits of attention are fundamental to healthy relationships between people and fundamental for building community. Because in order to know each other, in order to form bonds through mutual understanding and appreciation, we have to pay attention to one another. And there are two basic reasons why. One is that we all need to distinguish between our idea of another person and the reality of that person. We need to test our idea of someone for accuracy by paying attention. And the other reason is that people change. No matter how accurate our idea of someone is, it might be out of date. Attention is no less important for the smooth and healthy functioning of organizations. Organizational leaders need to pay attention to the people they serve. John Buren's a former president of our denominational organization, the Unitarian Universalist Association, quotes one of his mentors as saying that leadership is something we're all capable of. It's nothing more than having something left over after taking care of yourself to pay attention to someone else. Sure, there are other skills that help. The ability to organize, the ability to charm, the ability to motivate people, and various other talents we may have, such as the facility with numbers or with words. All of these help. But without attention, without cultivating our capacity to notice, to perceive accurately, to listen and really hear the depth of what's being said or see the significance of what's being done. Without that, our other talents and abilities may be only fruitlessly or aimlessly applied. And we speak of our church leaders and we list their names in our newsletters or orders of service so you'll know who they are and what they do in the church. But where there are leaders, there are also followers. If there are no followers, then the leaders are not leading. And they are not being supported. Leaders need followers, not just to fit the definition of leader, somebody's following, but to help and sustain them in taking up the weight of their responsibilities. And just as there is a quality that we call leadership, there is also a quality we may call followership. In order to cultivate either of these qualities, in ourselves, we need to pay enough attention to one another to develop the trust and gain one another's consent and help. In this way, leaders and followers together can create the conditions in which to move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out, as Marge Piercy puts it. We often speak about leadership, but followership is an unsung discipline. It needs to be named, I think. At the very least, we need to speak of followership to remind ourselves that leadership happens in a context of relationship, of trust, and consent. Followership is a discipline of supporting leaders and helping them to lead well. It is not submission, but the wise and good care of leaders, done out of a sense of gratitude for their willingness to take on the responsibilities of leadership and a sense of hope and faith in their abilities and potential. Good followership requires paying attention to those leaders. What are they trying to accomplish? What goal or purpose of the organization are they trying to serve? What skills do they bring, and what help are they asking for? What are their needs? Their needs. And what skills can you offer to support their efforts? Good followership also involves paying attention to oneself. May I always keep tame that which rages within me, Eusebius prayed. Have you ever had strong feelings about things that happen in church? Ever? Ever? How have you channeled those feelings in constructive ways? How have you helped others to do so? Sometimes somebody needs a hand to tame what rages within them. Eusebius also prayed, "May I accustom myself to be gentle and never angry with others because of circumstances. Things don't always go the way we wish or the way we expect. The ability to roll gracefully with such upsets is a mark of a good follower." And when he wrote, "May I know good people and follow in their footsteps," Eusebius prayed to have a discipline that both good leaders and good followers have. We can find mentors for leadership, and we can also find mentors for followership. There are good examples and good teachers all around, here among us, who can help us keep our balance as leaders and followers, and whose footsteps we can follow when we need a good pattern to go by. If we pay attention, we can find them and find the help we need to grow as leaders and as followers. As a church community, we all must remember that, as Marge Piercy says, the pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. Work is real when we understand the value of it, when we understand what the work we do is, that it is benefiting someone. As leaders and followers alike, we must remember that the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. When we have a common trust and consent, when we are paying attention to one another, we can grasp after that satisfying shape together. Make plans that are clean and evident. Work together in ways that are real. In the first draft of our plans, in our first attempts to carry them out, we don't always envision how to do well what we are trying to do. A plan or procedure can always be tweaked in progress and improved so that it is more attuned and effective. When leaders and followers are working well together, with trust and proper attention to one another and to the task at hand, these tweaks are always possible. And it is always possible to shift our plans and procedures smoothly, moving in a common rhythm to make the change. I began by talking about how spiritual disciplines call our attention to the values that we strive to live by. Is there a spiritual discipline that a community can follow to cultivate the qualities of good leadership and good followership? Well, I have one to offer. It comes from my colleague, Dennis Daniel, who calls it Dennis's pretty good suggestion. What Dennis suggests is that we develop the habit to ask 3 questions whenever we undertake any work for the church. Who needs to know? Whose turf is this? Who can I get to help? These questions help us to communicate more fully and effectively who else needs to know, to consult anyone who might be affected by our plans, whose turf is this, and to collaborate to get the job done. Who can I get to help? I call those the 3 C's of shared ministry: communicate, consult, collaborate. Say that with me. Communicate, consult, collaborate. Well done. This spiritual discipline calls our attention to our best habits of relating to each other. When we stick to our best relationship habits, habits of paying attention and understanding and appreciating one another, then we build trust between and amongst us, and our culture of caring and mutual support is strengthened. Under these conditions, we may free ourselves of old frustrations and keep forming better organizational habits. Who else needs to know reminds us to communicate well. Whose turf is this reminds us to consider the responsibilities taken up by others in the church, to think how our plans might affect them, and to consult them. And who can I get to help reminds us, first of all, that others can help and might want to. And secondly, it reminds us that we don't have to go it alone. We can collaborate. In these ways, we can live into the best habits of working together, supporting leaders and helping them lead well, expressing our gratitude for their willingness to lead, as well as our faith and hope in their abilities. We can tend to our leaders' needs in concrete and meaningful ways that are easily within our gift to give. So may we strive using the 3 C's of shared ministry, which are
communicate, consult, collaborate,
to build not only beloved community, but also beloved teams. So may it be. Amen.
Now I now invite David McCullough to return to front of the sanctuary to extinguish our chalice. Please join in saying our closing words, which are printed in the order of service.
Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. And may you go forth surrounded by the spirit of mutual love.